go. All right. So today, page 115 in our journal. Of course, everybody's going to be nice and quiet. 10:25. Now, a couple of things. First of all, the book wants us to do this by graphing. That's okay. I can do this by graphing. So if I take out my graphics calculator and I go y equals, if I go ahead and go x squared subtract 2x, I can do this. I can do this by graphing. I can use my calculator. So I just went to my y equals, right? And so if you are totally lost in the math piece and you can get all the answers off a calculator, that's kind of cool too, isn't it, right? And I'm going to check my window. I want to make sure my window's a normal window. Let's see. This is probably, they go negative 6 to 6. So I'm going to go negative 6 to 6, right? And then probably negative 4 to 10. I'm going to use their scales, right, so that it works on my calculator. Negative 4 to, looks like 10. And then I'm going to graph it, okay? Well, if I'm looking for the zeros are where it crosses the x-axis, right? So it sure looks like it's at 0 and 2, correct? So I'm thinking, all right, the answer is x equals 0 and x equals 2. That might be true. That might be true. I can use a trace button. We got a button called a trace button, and I can trace it, and I can move my cursor so that it's at that spot. There's 0, 0, like that, okay, 0, 0, and then I can use my trace button, and I'm like at about, well, that's the hard part. See how the calculator's not foolproof? Because I'm just, so sometimes it'll give me right to 2, 0, but not exact. So then the calculator's a great tool to get an idea of what's going on. Two things for me, though. I can do this faster by factoring, and it's going to be exact, okay? So I don't even use the calculator. I know that the calculator's going to go there, there. It's going to look something like this. And what I really want is the x-intercepts, right? For me, though, I'm going to do it the way I like to do it, and I like to do it by factoring. It's faster. I don't need graph paper. It's faster. I don't need graph paper. And it's exactly the right answer. So if I go common factor on an x, and I have an x minus 2 equals 0, right? So by common factor, right, I have my mini equations. One mini equation says x equals 0. The other mini equation is x minus 2 equals 0. And by doing it using algebra, I get the exact answer, 0 and x equals 2. The calculator is a good tool. The problem with the calculator, though, is it's only going to try and find the answers. It's not going to do the math, right? The math is exact. Because when I tried to find 2 on my calculator, I couldn't quite get 2, could I? Is this going to be a 2.1? Is it 2.04? Is it a 1.9? Is it a 2.17? I don't know. But if I do the math, I know it is. It's exactly 2. Yes, Isabella?
You can also look at the table of the calculator. It has the x values, and you can just look at the x values.
That's also true, yes. The table also works. Yep. Yep. Okay, so now, they go through, and again, they want you to do it by graphing. I'm not going to do it by graphing. I'm going to do it actually by doing it by factoring. Now, I want to do number E. So go to the next page, and I want to do E, okay? Yeah, number E, letter E. So if I look at E, E won't factor, right? E is going to be different. So if I graph this one, and I'm actually going to do it on my calculator. If I go x squared minus 3x plus 5. Okay, guys watching this?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, and I graph this. What do you notice about the graph? It is offset, but does it have any x-intercepts? No. So if what we're trying to find out is when it's equal to 0, when it's equal to 0 is when it crosses the x-axis, right? This one is going to be up at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I don't need a perfect drawing of it, but mostly I need to see this. It never equals 0. There are no x values at all that let it equal 0. No solution. So if it doesn't factor, right, you might want to look at it and see what's going on, right? If it factors, you can go boom, boom, and get your answer, right? So let's move on, okay? Let's go on and turn your page again to page 118, okay? Page 118. Okay? Now, it says by graphing. I'm not going to do it by graphing, okay? I'm not, because I don't think graphing is the easiest way to do it. Graphing takes time. You got to get out your calculator. You got to type it in and look at it. Now, if you want to, you can. If you want to, you can do it by graphing. Me, I'm going to do it by factoring, because factoring is more accurate and it's faster. I think it's faster. Because we can factor. Common factor number 1. Take out an x, right? X plus 4 equals 0, right? Many equations, x equals 0, x plus 4 equals 0, right? One answer is 0. The other answer is negative 4. Now, it just says solve. It doesn't say graph, does it? It just says solve by graphing, but if I choose not to graph it and just solve it, I got the answers, right? If you want to graph it, go ahead. I'd prefer not to, okay? Let's look at number 2, okay? So for me, I want to factor it, so what I'm going to do is this. It has to be equal to 0. Equal to 0, okay? I've got to make it equal to 0. I don't like negative x squared. Personally, you can do it that way. I'm going to actually take and move it over, okay? I'm going to take this negative x squared, I'm going to move it over, okay? Oh, this pen's dead. Why do I keep using it? There we go. All right, you grab a pin that works. Here we go. I got a pin that works. So I'm going to bring over the negative x squared to make it equal to 0. Now, if I bring it over, I've got to add it. Does that make sense? I've got to add the negative x squared, so I plus it over. So I'm going to have this kind of an answer. I'm going to have, all right, I'm going to have 0 equals a positive x squared minus a 2x plus 1. Okay? And if you are going to graph it, you've got to have it equal y anyway, right? So now, factor. Oh, I can factor that. Parentheses, 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 right? X minus 1, x minus 1. Because negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. Negative 1 plus negative 1 is a negative 2, right? So I get my mini equations, and I get x equals 1, and I get x equals 1 again. There are 2 answers, but they're the same answer twice. So let me show you what's going on in the calculator, okay? So if I were to graph this, because it's worth looking at, right? If I graph the x squared, subtract 2x plus 1, and if I graph this, it touches at 1, in a sense, twice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? So that's what we call a double root or a double zero. So negative 1 occurs, or positive 1 occurs twice, in a sense, right? Because it has to go through and come back. So if it skims it, that's how you get 2 answers, okay? Number 3, I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen in 3. I could graph it. What do you guys think is going to happen in 3? It's going to be above the x-axis. Now, if you're not sure, it doesn't factor, right? But if you're not sure, we could graph it, right? We go, okay, well, let's see. Y equals, clear. I'm pretty sure on this one, x squared plus 2x plus 4, right? If I graph it, all right, I'm looking for x-intercepts. There are none. You guys agree?
No.
There are none. No solutions, okay? No solutions, okay? All right, let's look at 4. Am I going too fast? Okay, let's look at 4. Okay, will it factor? If it does factor, it's easier. It does factor x and x. How about a negative 1, negative 5, right? Oh, negative 1, negative 4, my bad. Negative 1, negative 4. So my mini equations, I get x equals 1 and x equals 4. And if I were to graph that, you would see it go through at 1 and 4. Okay, clear. X squared minus 5x plus 4. Okay, and if I graph it, there it is. Goes through at 1 and 4. Okay. I prefer not to graph it. I prefer just to factor it, okay? 6. Okay, let's do 6, okay? So if I'm going to do 6, make it equal 0, okay? So I'm going to go x squared minus 2x plus 6 equals 0, okay? It doesn't factor, so I'm thinking that probably there's going to be no solutions. But I can always check. I could graph it, right? I could say, well, because of plus 6, it doesn't factor, so let's try it. So I put in my calculator, and I try my x squared, subtract my 2x, plus 6. Let's graph it. That's what I thought. No solution, right? Doesn't cross the x-axis. Doesn't have, so no solution. Okay? Okay, let's do 7, and then we'll go to the other page real quick. 7. What do you think about 7? Well, 7 could be done on a calculator. I could graph it, and I could get the answers. But it's faster for me to factor. It will factor, okay? If it factors, it's much faster. I think it's faster. I'm going to go x and x. There's an invisible 1 there, right? An invisible 1 there. Negative 4, positive 3. I have my mini equations, so I get x equals 4 and x equals negative 3. And if you were to graph it, that's exactly what you'd see, okay? Am I making sense? It's not that hard, is it? I prefer to factor. I think it's easier and faster, and it's more accurate. It's more accurate, because if I were to graph this one and go y equals x squared minus x minus 12. And I like what Jay said. It's a nice way to check, right? You can graph it and you can check. And it looks like it's at negative 3 and at 4, right? Okay, it is a good way to check, isn't it? Okay, now, what about 9? 9, I know the answer to 9 right off the bat, don't you? Well, if I had to graph this parabola, where would it start? Up at 4. I don't need a calculator. I can do that one on my own, right? No solution, right? But if you're not sure, put it in the calculator and check it, right? So, no solution. Right. Okay, now slide the paper over. Let's do a couple of these easy ones. Let's do number 12. But no, let's do 11 first, okay? Okay, number 11. They give us the equation, right? Yes. Yeah, they give us the equation. So, just looking at the graph, what's the answer? X equals what? 1. And it happens twice, but we only have to write it once. You guys agree with that? Okay, now, number 12. Just looking at the graph, what's my answers? X equals?
1 and 3.
1 and x equals 3. Nice. Okay, now, let's look at I want to do number 13, and then we're going to do the hard one, 18. When we do 18, you're going to pay really good attention, okay? All right, 13. What do you think the answers are? It's kind of hard to tell, isn't it?
I would guess 3,
Does it factor? Does this factor? Does it factor? I think it does. I think if you factor it, you're going to get... So I can't really tell from the picture, can I? But if I factor it, I can get the answer, okay? X minus 2, x minus 1, right? You guys agree with that? So I know the answer has to be 2 and 1. So in this case, in 13, the graph it wasn't a good enough graph, right? You guys agree with that? I'm like, well, I'm not sure exactly what those are because the graph was kind of a lousy graph. Whoever drew the graph drew it too small. But if I factor and solve it, I know for sure it's at 2 and 1. Okay, 18. You guys have your calculator? All right. Now in 18, it will not factor, okay? Won't factor, okay? It won't factor. But it has 2 answers. I know it has 2 answers, okay? You can't say no solution. It has 2 answers. I can see it. It's there and there, right? So it won't factor, but what we can do is graph it, okay? So let's graph this, okay? Clear. Y equals, put it in. I'm going to go my negative x squared minus 8x minus 13, and I'm going to graph it, okay? Let me shift it over a little bit. Okay, you want to see a little trick? I want to shift it over a little bit, so I go to my window, and on my X min, I'll go maybe -10, and I should see more of it. Okay, there we go. Now, it does have two answers. Watch carefully, okay? Want everybody look. Everybody look. Right here in blue, what's it say?
Cal.
Okay, we want that button, but it's in blue, okay? So we're looking for the zeros, right? We're going to let this button find the zeros for us. So we're going to go to second, calc. Okay, everybody push that. Second, so hit blue button, calc, okay? And you should get this, okay? So in our calculator we have a choice. Zero, minimum, maximum, intercept, calculus. Don't worry about calculus. So we want the zeros, don't we?
Yes.
Now how many zeros are there?
Those.
So let's find one at a time. So first, let's go ahead and have the calculator find the zeros. So I go and scroll down to my 0, okay? Now, since there are two zeros, it's going to say, show me where to look. The calculator is going to say, show me where to look. It says left bound. So if I'm going to find this zeros, I just have to be to the left of it. I have to tell the calculator where to look, because there are two different zeros, right? So I'm going to move the cursor over to where I'm at left of my 0. Even though I'm above it, I'm still left of it. Does that make sense? I'm above it, but I'm left of it. So it's blinking, blinking, blinking. When I push enter, it locks it in. Enter. Okay? Right bound. Well, I'm looking for that one, so I'll go to the right of it, which is below it. Okay? So now I'm telling the calculator to look in between here and here. It's blinking, blinking, blinking. I push enter, it's locked it in. So now the calculator's going to look for the 0 in between here, which is where it is, right? It says guess. You don't really have to guess. That's silly.
How do we lock it in again?
Just push enter. Push enter. Okay? Now, hit enter again, guess, and here's my 0. It's at about -2.27. We'll round it up. So this 0 is about, and it says nearest 10th. So we'll go -2.3, comma 0 is that one there. Now there's two zeros. Let's find the other the same way, okay? The same way. So here's my calculator, okay? Where do I find the 0 function? In this calc feature, okay? It's in blue. So I'm going to go second, calc. I'm looking for the 0, right? I want this one now, right? I want that one. So let's tell the calculator where to look. Left bound, okay? I got to go to the left of it. So the left of my 0 is actually below it, but it's still left of it. Does that make sense? I'm to the left of the point, even though it's below it. Okay? Enter. Right bound. I have to tell the calculator where to look. Now I'm going to go to the right of my point. It's above it, but it's right of it, okay? Enter. So now I'm telling the calculator, look in between here for the 0. It knows where to look. You have to tell it where to look because there's two different zeros, correct?
Correct.
So you have to say, look right here. Okay, it's blinking, blinking, blinking. I push enter, it locks it in. And the 0 is at -5.70. So this one is at -5.70. So that's another feature on how to find zeros. For me, if I can factor it, it's always the fastest. You guys agree? If it doesn't factor, then there's a couple of other ways to find the zeros. Okay, that's what I have for today. Thank you for being quiet. Really appreciate it. I know everybody else appreciates it, right?